People say I'm toxic, and honestly, I don't care.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good night, wherever you are. I'm Abz of October Red, and I'm joined by Matchroom CEO. And it's been a long time, Frank. I have missed you. Frank Smith, ladies and gentlemen. Frank, the lovely Smith.
It's just come up on my phone. Abz October Red is live with Frank Smith.
See, on Instagram.
Yep.
I like that. So the technology does work.
It
Frank,
works.
first of all, I've got to do pleasantries. How have you been? Because I feel like I haven't spoken to you for ages. It's just been a bit of a whirlwind.
I've been good. Busy. Lots going on. I had a break after after the New York show. I had a week away, which was nice, and then back to it with last week at the Copper Box. And yeah, lots to look forward to. Some big shows coming up. Some big shows announced. You know, it's boxing. It never stops.
It definitely never stops. Can we go back a little bit? I know we had obviously Conor Benn, Chris Eubank Jr. What a night that was. First of all, it was the first Ring magazine card. So that was a good way to set it off. We had it in the UK, and boy, did we put on a show on that card. All of the fights were good on it, but just your kind of like overview of that, because I know we didn't get to touch on that at all.
Yeah, look, a spectacular night. Everything we said it would be and more, really. You know, it was a fight that had built its own story over the last 3 years. You know, we all know why the fight was made in the first place 3 years ago, but I think by the time this one came round, it had its own meaning. And it was a fight that neither guy... I don't think you would have seen either of those guys fight like that in any other fight, maybe. You know, I don't think it was quite human what they both did in there. I watched part of it back actually for the first time. I never watched the last 5 rounds of the fight because I had a few problems. We had a few things we were dealing with the event side of things, so I missed the last 5 rounds of the fight, and I watched it back for the first time I think at the weekend or last week, and yeah, it was spectacular and lived up to everything and more. As you say, the first Ring magazine event. What a night and what a way to deliver boxing on the biggest of stages.
It was, and I think it's a once in a lifetime thing. I don't think anything will ever match up with that because of obviously the generational rivalry as such. It was electric. I did a live watch along for it at home, and even the viewers that were in the chat were everyone was in awe. We were all screaming. It was an absolutely fabulous night. So we had that, Frank, and we were on the ceiling. We were happy. The Rings announced itself in conjunction with yourself, with Boxer for the first one. And then we go over to New York. Frank, it was really anticlimactical compared to what we had in the UK. Now, I don't know if that's me and my British bias kicking in again, but I just felt so depleted after a phenomenal show in the UK. And then we went to America and it was just lackluster.
Yeah, look, I think it was a very hard weekend to follow, wasn't it? When you had a fight like that, you know, it was a hard fight to follow on from. Boxing's a difficult one because, you know, ultimately, as with all high level sport, not every single sporting event you watch is going to be the most entertaining. Let's be completely honest and open about it. You know, Premier League football, not every Premier League football match with the best players in the world is going to be great. The difference is they get to perform every week, sometimes every 3 or 4 days, and they get to, you know, have a good game, have a bad game, and 3 days later the bad game is forgotten about. You know, boxing is these moments where fighters fight once every 4, 5, 6 months, you know, at that level especially. And the truth is, I think you're not always going to have your best night. But you also have to then accept the public pressure that comes with that if you don't put a performance in. Look, I think the reality is people want to see great fights. They want to see brutality. And, you know, and if you don't get that, people will go, well, that was a load of rubbish. And you're judged on that moment there. And that's part and parcel of it. You know, when you're getting paid the money these guys get paid, and when you're in a sport like this, if you don't have a great weekend, you have to deal with the public side of it. That's I think I would just say, from a sporting perspective, that's life, and that happens in all sports, and it happens with the best athletes in the world. And some days a golfer goes out and has a terrible game of golf, but he gets to go back out for the next round the next day and has a good game. But boxing, there's nothing quite like it. You're always judged on your last performance, and like I say, it was a very hard weekend to follow, wasn't it?
A very hard weekend, and I think boxing is always under the microscope. I think the hype was obviously around the rematch with Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia, and it was sort of like tumbleweed after that, because like I said, we were on the scene and we expected certain things to happen. It was the Ring Part 2, then followed by obviously Canelo Skull. So we had this plethora of fights where we'd set a benchmark, and we do this in boxing. But with the Ring, because we've got so many different subsidiaries now in boxing, Frank, which Matchroom are involved in conjunction with Riyadh Season and now the Ring, is it possible that the Ring can look at potential cards they're going to put on and start to mix the fights up? So we do get, if, say, for example, all of those fights to me just didn't live up to an expectation. But if they were mixed with some maybe British fights, American fights, and they were mixed up, it would have been, sometimes on cards you get fantastic fights, then you get medium fights, and then you get fantastic fights. Mix it up like that, because you could say it's like everyone on that night just didn't have a good night. Or the best night.
I mean, again, it goes back to the point of, look, who would have said necessarily Ben Eubank would have been the fight it was? Hindsight's a great. Like, we always knew
there was always going to be a cracker.
Yeah, but did we think it would be? There were so many people had an opinion. Oh, he's going to stop him early. Oh, the size is going to play.
Yeah, true.
And I think boxing's such a hard one. Like, we've put on shows in the past that you think are the best shows ever, right? And go, this is going to be a cracker. That's going to be a cracker. And then ultimately you go out there and the fight doesn't deliver. Again, it's sport. It's high level sport, and not every fight. You can do your job beforehand. Ultimately, they've got to get in the ring and then do their part at that sort of part as well. And I think it's like, it was such a big occasion as well. It was such a big event. There was so much talk around the event as a whole. The Times Square, it was spectacular. When have we ever seen anything like that? And I think as well, being there in real life, was looking around going, wow, this is Times Square.
Okay.
They've shut down basically the streets. Like, there's thousands of people out watching it. It was a spectacle. It was a moment in the sport that we've never seen. And, I'm sure now with the Ring and Riyadh Season, continued involvement in the sport, we'll see more nights like that, of course. But yes, part and parcel of it. That's sport, and again, we can all do our job. We can all sell the fights, and the fighters sold the night, didn't they? And then, it's not always going to be, unfortunately, it's not always going to live up to the same level of standard as Eubank Benjamin. So, but it was a spectacle, and that's what the sport needs.
Okay, so more on the spectacle basis. Do you think sometimes we're greedy as fans? Because listen, since obviously Riyadh Season, since His Excellency's stepped into the boxing, we have been a bit spoiled. Do you think that's kind of echoed now, where we sort of like, I don't know, we have this like, well, it should be that good all the time. You've set the bar now.
Look, there is part of the cards are so deep, and the stars and talent on show. When you look at it and go, what, like, these are all headliners in their own right. You go back to the Eubank Ben card, the undercard. Liam Smith, Aaron McKenna could have headlined a UK show.
Oh, Anthony
Yard, Lyndon Arthur could have headlined a show. Chris Billam-Smith against Brandon Glanton could have headlined its own show. Chev Clark, Vidal Riley could have headlined its own show. And that's just the undercard section of that event. So we're spoiled in a sense of, if you look at it now, people are so used to it over a 12, 14, 16-month period. But yes, but again, it's good for the consumer. You're getting great nights of boxing, but you quickly forget like how you got to that point, and go, well, that's not as good as that undercard there. And it's like, well, if you go back 14 months, like I say, all of those fights could have headlined in their own right. And that's the same on all of these cards.
Definitely. I just think it just was obviously on the night in the US. You had all the names. You had all the important names there. The only one that I'd like to see there, but I don't know if we ever will, would be Gervonta Davis. But when it comes to like the American stars, the names in boxing, you definitely did have them all there at Times Square. But we could go on with that. I think we've just been a bit spoiled. And like I said, that bar has been set. But I would like to ask, Vidal Wley obviously went up against Chev Clark. Talk to me about what's going to happen with Chev Clark next. I mean, obviously he lost to the French chap, and now obviously Vidal has obviously won the fight as well. So what would you do, or what do you intend to do? What's the plan around a fighter that, loses two on the trot?
Yeah, look, I think Chev will say it himself. I don't think you saw the best of Chev Clark in that fight. Against, not taking anything away from Vidal Wley, by the way, but I don't think it was the best performance either from Chev Clark. Great win for Vidal Wley. He's got a lot ahead of him as well. But I think for Chev, where he's at in his career, look, he's always tested himself from the early part of his career. But it's also because he needed to. He turned pro a bit later.
Okay.
From an age perspective, and he needed to move a little bit quicker. And I think now it will be about what he wants to do. He's gone away. I spoke to him after the fight. He was going away. He's back in a couple of weeks' time, and I'm going to sit down with him in person then. I just said take some rest, because he's had two back-to-back tough. He obviously fought in December. That was a tough fight against Mosquera on the undercard of the Monaco show. Then back out against Vidal. So take some time out, and then let's sit down and decide what route you want to go from there. But I think, look, it's not where he is in his career. It changes. If he was a 22-year-old prospect, it would be a bit different. But one thing about Chev Clark, he's always tested himself, and he's always put himself in the real fights. And you have to give him ultimate respect for that, because, as I've said tons of times, there's a lot of fighters who aren't doing that. And he's been in very entertaining fights throughout as well. So I think I'll sit down with him in a couple of weeks. I think he's back. I spoke to his manager yesterday, and then we'll work out a plan from there.
Also, there's been a lot of rumblings around the internet about, the rematch. Is it definitely going to be happening with Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn? Is it real, or is this just a little bit of testing the waters, so to speak, or is it a definite? Because I've seen nothing official yet.
Yeah, look, the fight was signed as a 2-fight deal either way. When the deal was done, the key is the venue. Tottenham have got the football fixtures for the Premier League. Don't come out until June 15th, I think, or June 17th, around that sort of period. Once we have those, we'll then be able to finalise the date. Obviously, His Excellency said in the ring after the fight that the plan was to do the rematch at Tottenham again. So that's what we're waiting on that front. But as far as we're concerned, the fight's contracted. It always has been a 2-fight deal. And, we'll see a rematch. It's a fight people want to see. It's a massive fight.
Is there any room for negotiation in the contract regarding the weight of 160 pounds? I mean, is there any room for manoeuvring around that? There was so much hoo-ha around the weight. I understand that the contracts were signed. I was one of them that said if it was that much of a problem, don't sign the contracts. I've been open about that. However, is there any room for manoeuvring around the weight at all?
I mean, look, both fights were signed on the same terms, and as you say, our job is to represent Conor Benn in the negotiations. So, we sit there and we do a deal, obviously with Ring Magazine in this instance.
Yeah.
And we represent Conor Benn and his interests in that. Ultimately on the other side, Chris Eubank Jr. will have someone doing the same for him, representing his interests, and you'll come to terms that are either agreeable to both sides, or you don't agree and the fight doesn't happen. So our job was to agree those terms. We did that. That's the terms of the rematch. But as everything in life, everything's always a discussion. But they're the signed terms of the rematch that are in place.
Okay. So there is room for maneuvering, but at the end of the day, it is still signed for the 160.
They're the contractual terms of it. But, but again, as with anything in life, if someone says, I want an extra pound to do the fight here and that's where I'm comfortable at, it's all a commercial discussion, isn't it? With everything you handle. I kind of look at a lot of people's reaction to the 160. You have to remember Chris Eubank Jr. is a natural 160 fighter who, if he wouldn't have fought Conor Benn, forget Conor Benn for a second, all the talk was about him fighting for a 160 world title. So it's not he was pushed to fight at 160. That's his natural weight. That wasn't something that we, out of the blue. It wasn't like he was looking to go up to 168. He was going to fight Janibek, wasn't he? He was going to fight Lara. That was all the talk beforehand, So he chose to fight Conor Benn at 160, which was the way he would have fought those guys for a world championship for.
Yeah, I think the argument around that was, and I'll play devil's advocate here, is the same day weigh-in, the extra £10 only. I think it was around potential that stuff, because that fighters will potentially, after the weigh-in on Friday, they could potentially put that extra weight on that they need to rehydrate properly. So I think playing devil's advocate, it's that same day weigh-in and only being able to go up by 10 instead of £12. I think that was the later argument, not the initial one.
Yeah, but I don't think that's something that's really been pushed by people. I think the thing that's been pushed is around the 160. Being open with you, from what I've seen, and it's like that's the point of he was always fighting at 160. That was the weight it was agreed at. That was the weight he was fighting at if it was any other fight. Less people have really been talking about, in my opinion, the 170 piece of the next day. As far as I understand, he weighed in one of those terrible Louis Vuitton jackets. So he must have had a couple of pound extra. He could have had.
Frank, I bet Christmas dinners round yours is fun.
I've just got a good sense of humour, Abz. I've also got some terrible clobber and jackets myself.
No, I haven't seen any yet. But what I will do is that, fair enough. Well, we know that the fight's going to happen. There is room for potential negotiation. We can draw a line under that now. You've had a couple of British signings, 3 that I'm really happy about, because I know you guys, you tend to sign globally. You've got a lot of focus abroad, not just in the UK. But you signed 3 Brits. More recently, one announced last week, one of those being a female. So shout out to Hakan's Ringside Live. Tia Ayton. When's her debut?
Her debut, I don't know if I don't think it's actually announced, but she will debut in the next month or so, and it will be announced very soon. So she's exciting. 18 years old, special talent. I've heard so many good things about her. Excited to get started with her. Adam Macker as well, who makes his professional debut on June 14th at MSG. Another tremendous talent, actually lives in Brighton. I said to him, on my road where I live, there was a load of Macker scaffolding signs. And I said, did you just put them all up? Because I look out my window and his name is everywhere down the road. But another tremendous talent. Obviously Leo Atang as well, heavyweight, who makes his debut on July 5th on the Manchester show. So 3 great new young fighters that we've signed up. And look, we're fully focused on the UK market as ever. We're coming off the back of a great night with Johnny Fisher and Dave Allen, a great show there. You've got June 21st, Galal Yafai defends his Birmingham, representing Birmingham there. I'll be up there. Galal Yafai, Shabazz Masood, Peter McGrail. You got Walker as well, Conor Walker defending his British title. You got Pat Brown on that card, Aaron Bowen, Ibrahim Spider Suleiman, a whole host of young talent as well on there. Then you got the July show as well that we announced at the weekend, Jack Catterall taking on Harlem Eubank. So look, the UK has always been a huge focus for us, as has global boxing and becoming a global, the global promoter in boxing. But we've never taken our eye off the ball. And we always listen to the fans as well. And we're our own biggest critics, as I've said to you on many occasions. And I think that run of shows, that we are fully focused. That I think in that 6-week period from May 17th to July 5th, what a run of shows there. And it's a great time for boxing, great time for British boxing.
Yeah, so congratulations to all of those new signings. It really did bring a smile to my face as well. And like you've mentioned, the Birmingham show, yet again, Queensbury versus Matchroom. You've put in Justice Honey against your previous fighter, the lovely Fabio Wley. I mean, wow, what a turn of events. That was so strange seeing Fabio sat on the opposite side of the table with Dillian White, obviously Eddie with the new guy, Justice Honey, and it's like surreal because boxing is just like this revolving door and it completely changes all the time. And now we've got this fight. Talk to us about that because I'm excited about that.
Yeah, look, it's a great heavyweight fight, and I think the first time the two have been challenged really at a world level between the two of them, and whoever comes through this one sets themselves up for a massive fight and puts themselves in a position and puts their name amongst that mix of those top heavyweights to get that opportunity.
Yeah.
Fabio Wley, as you say, we worked with for a long time, got a great relationship with him still. You know, lovely bloke, and obviously doing great things at Portman Road, doing a show in Ipswich. But Justice Hooney's a tremendous fighter as well. You know, I think he's been kept busy in the last sort of 6-9 months. You know, he had a good fight against Kevin Arena as well. And I'm excited for the fight. I think it's a brilliant fight. I'm excited to see it's exciting to go up against Queensbury as well. We got to try and claw some points back wherever we can. You know, even outside of the 5v5. But it's another good thing about the relationship being where it is. You know, obviously the zone relationship, us guys being on the zone now, it's good times and good fights are being made, you know, and it's a great main event.
And what I really like as well is the time management with both promoters. You seem to be managing that really well because I was thinking, you know, say if you start having fights on the same day, etc. But so far so good. It's been managed like really well. You know, some promoters have Friday fights. Yourself and Queensbury are really like mapping out the weekends nicely. And it fills it up for us as well because it just keeps it on one channel. And then we can just keep an eye on the boxing like continuously once a week. Johnny Fisher, I've got to touch on that. I did think he'd actually go in and win this time. So I've got to put my hands up. I think when I saw Dave Allen on the scales, I was like, oh, I'm not sure about this now. Johnny Fisher seemed to have a different attitude going into the fight as well. He was more serious, more focused. But unfortunately for him, he came up very short against the robust, experienced Dave Allen. And it was almost like watching Johnny Fisher lose. And then it's like, hi, Dave Allen. Dave Allen's now back with Matchroom. And it's a bit of a sticky one, but it's business. Talk to us a little bit about that and that relationship and what's going to happen with Johnny Fisher now. Have we found his mark? Has he found his benchmark? Is that it? Where is he going to go?
No, look, I think, you know, one thing you got to say about Johnny Fisher, he jumped straight back in there against a fighter that, you know, he obviously had a very tough fight, a tough night against in Saudi. And a lot of people felt that Dave Allen won that fight. And he showed a lot of bottle and a lot of heart in there, and a lot, you know, that has so much value, you know, in a fighter's career. You know, I think that experience he would have taken from that night, you know, would have been tenfold what he would have taken from other fights, knocking fighters out in the first round. You know, heavyweight boxing is just a whole nother realm as well. You know, you step up against these guys, they're big punchers. You go up against someone of that size, you know, I won't, you know, anyone getting hit if you get caught correctly. I think those first 4 rounds, Johnny boxed very well. Dave sort of was there and just kind of waiting. And look, he caught him, and you know, it was a great finish from Dave Allen as well. You know, but Johnny Fisher is someone we've worked with since his professional debut, and we'll continue to work with and rebuild. You know, it goes back to the point about, look, losses shouldn't define fighters. Ultimately, what should define fighters is your performance. If people want to watch you and tune in to watch you, that's the key. And with someone like Johnny Fisher, he's got a huge fan base because he leaves it all on the line. And he could have easily gone, do you know what? I beat Dave Allen. Doesn't really matter what people think. I'm going to go on and do my own thing. He felt like he had a point to prove. He went in there and, you know, he didn't get the win. But that doesn't mean it's the end for Johnny Fisher. There's so much more to come. He's 26 years old.
Yeah, he's a baby.
You know, and I feel it goes back to that point about a loss shouldn't define a career. You know, if you're in fights like that, people want to watch. People want to see vulnerability. People want to
Yeah, we
see
do.
entertainment. You know, and if you can rebuild your way back through, there's so many big fights to be made. And we're 100% behind Johnny Fisher and committed to the journey with him. With Dave Allen, we've had a great relationship for many years. You know, we promoted many of his fights. He obviously had fights with other on other platforms as well over time. And I think, look, I'm happy for Dave Allen because he's a lovely bloke. And if there was any, like, you can still have a relationship with both people and say, like, Dave Allen's got a journey ahead of him now. And he won his first, I think it was his first title as well. He won that night, and, we will work with Dave Allen, obviously. That could be another, huge rematch down the line as well, possibly between the two of those guys. But they're all on their own independent journey, and we've got great relationships with them all. But like I say, for Johnny, we're 100% committed to the rebuild. Take some time out, and come back, and then we'll make a plan of where we go.
What are you going to put? Where would you put Dave Allen in? I've seen like loads of stuff online from other media outlets. I can't remember all of them, but even somebody saying rematch with Dillian White. What's the strategy around? I see that smile there. What's the strategy around Dave Allen? You've not got a very good poker face, have you?
No, he's not fighting Dillian White. Yeah, anyway. So, no, look, I think he's in a great position because he's loved, isn't he? He's got a fan base. You only have to look at the audience after. Obviously Johnny's got a huge fan base, but there was a lot of people in there for Dave Allen as well. I think, but that's testament to his character as well, and both those guys, because they're both two very nice blokes, genuine people. And you don't always get a lot of those, not just in boxing, but in sport. These are two genuine guys that people respect. So I think, for Dave Allen, it will be, we'll sit down and decide what the route is together and make a plan.
Anything that could pop up like quickly, or are you going to sort of take your time with him? So I know I'm digging, but
I think. I mean, look, anything's possible. I think at the same time, he's worked very hard to get himself into this position, and being focused as well. Because look, he's had tough times in his career where I don't, and he'll openly say he hasn't been as focused with the sport and hasn't enjoyed it and hasn't loved it. And I think right now he's in a place where he's enjoying it, and you've got to make the right moves now. And that doesn't necessarily mean rushing into the first opportunity that comes up, but as we know with heavyweight boxing, there are a lot of opportunities out there, and there's a lot of big names that need fights.
Yeah, and there's also time to claw some wins back again for Matchroom as well. But I've got to finish it on the Eubank Matchroom rivalry continues, and I jumped out of my seat, and I might be alone in this. Jack Catterall, Harlem Eubank. I love that fight so much. Yeah, we've got a couple of minutes left, so I'll let you run with it. I know there's a press conference coming up. I can't wait. But your words, Frank.
Yeah, press conference next Tuesday. Look, I think it's a brilliant fight. I think it's a brilliant fight for both of them. I think Jack Catterall, coming off the back of his loss, he's going to want to rebuild and climb straight back in there and get his name right back in the position for where it was. He's, all those years back, he should have been undisputed champion. He avenged that decision, obviously, against Josh Taylor. That's a big fight down the line, obviously, as well. But Harlem Eubank's on a great run. The great win against McKenna recently. Great finish there, and he's got the name there. The Eubank name is in a great place right now. I'm excited for the fight. It's a big fight. It's the kind of fights we need to make. It's the kind of fights that people will tune into. He's had huge audiences on Channel 5, obviously, as well. It's great to be working with Wasserman on this event. So, yeah, these are the fights we want to make, and like I was in the previous fight with the previous Eubank, I'm going to stay. I just want to make great fights, and this is an example of a great fight between two fighters. And again, two very nice guys, two very nice, genuine guys who, are going to go in there and give it their all. And, it's the kind of thing we want to see and we need to make more of.
And we're definitely going to be entertained. As I know that the press conference for this is next week, I'll have to I'll have to wear my helmet because, strange things happen to me when I go to the Co-op Live.
Be careful. No, it's not. It's at the AO Arena this time.
I'll be safe then. No bollards for my head. Anyway, so we'll catch up then. But Frank, thank you so much once again. I know you're on the time constraints because you're such a popular guy. But we'll catch up next week.
Lovely to see you. See you next week.
Take it easy. Thank you so much.
Right.
See you later.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Guys, thank you so much for tuning into that. It was a quick catch up with Frank Smith from Matchroom Boxing. There will be a press conference next week for Jack Catterall versus Harlem Eubank. I cannot wait for that. So I'll have some content for you then. Potentially, yeah, I will be. I'll be doing a watch along for the Queensbury fight this weekend as well. So don't forget to tune into the live watch along. No footage, just conversations and commentary. You know what it's like. Thank you all for joining in. Sorry I didn't get to flash up everything. It's because I knew I was on a strict time limit and I had the questions that I needed to ask. So thank you all for joining and watching and putting some bits in the chat. So yeah, we will catch up the weekend, Saturday night, live watch along, probably 8:30ish for the Queensbury, Josh Taylor versus Echo Esserman. So guys, you know what we say, stay ready and au revoir.
People say I'm toxic, and honestly, I don't care.